Hello, and welcome to Based on Facts, where fiction and superstition meet logic and scientific facts. Broadcast on 95.7 WELT from Fort Wayne, Indiana. Now, I am your host, Chris Rex, and I will be talking about life and some of the implications for life tonight. Now, this all stems from what I saw in the 2017 budget as far as Obama cutting funding for all abstinence-only education. Now, this makes sense to me because from personal experience, I know that teenagers don't tend to listen to adults much. And so trying to tell them that, hey, sex is this big ugly monster that needs to be avoided entirely, it doesn't work so well because every teenager believes that they have to go out and seek the facts in life themselves. So it was kind of astounding to me that we had actually wasted 30 years and $2 billion worth of funding on this program, on abstinence-only education. Why would we do that? That's just crazy to me. I could think of many more better things to spend $2 billion on than an education program that is fundamentally flawed from the get-go. And so it's cool because when we start looking at the numbers and evaluating them, we see that one of the most dominant parties supporting this bill is the Republicans. Okay, and they were very disappointed with Obama's plan for 2017 budget in that they had supported abstinence-only education, especially in Texas, which is pretty much a Republican stronghold. And in Texas, what they had shown was that despite the fact they encouraged abstinence and did away with all their sex education programs in the state, they ended up having the highest rate of repeat teenage births. All right? And that was coupled with the 5th highest teenage birth rate in general. So it's clear that abstinence-only education doesn't work. Because in Texas, they're not even teaching their kids about sex ed. They're just telling them, ooh, sex is this big, ugly monster that you need to stay away from. You even remotely think about sex, you're going to get AIDS and get pregnant. Well, that's not going to work. Okay, working with teenage kids for the past few years at the middle and high school levels, I have learned that kids don't listen much to people of adult age, particularly when it refers to things that might be suspicious, like talking about monsters and big bad guys and whatever else. Teenagers know it's all crap. So why you would think this program of telling kids that abstinence is the way to go, otherwise a big, scary, ugly monster will eat you, why that was ever thought to be successful, I will never understand. From my perspective, what I would like to know is I would like to know the facts. And funny enough, that's kind of how a lot of teenagers behave. Teenagers will seek out the facts for themselves. They will go through life exploring and experiencing life for what it is. Because sooner or later, they will find out the truth. And so it's just better to be upfront with them. Right from the get-go. Be like, hey, you have sex without a condom, you are highly likely to get pregnant. That's a fact of life. You have sex without a condom and you are highly likely to spread whatever STD you or your partner may have. That's a fact of life. Be straight with your kids, and that will yield much better results in the end, as opposed to lying and conniving to try to get around these issues. Just be straight with them, man. It's just that easy. So this all kind of ties into how a developing fetus plays into the mother. We're kind of talking about abstinence and the chances of getting pregnant. Well, when you are pregnant, how do you perceive that thing growing inside you? Well, a number of people perceive that thing growing inside you, the fetus, as being a parasite. And the word parasite just strikes such a nerve in so many people that this becomes a very hot topic for discussion. What is a parasite? A parasite is typically perceived as this foreign element that's trying to take over your entire body, steal all of your resources, all your nutrients, and then leave you a rotting shell of a carcass in the end. And generally that's true. When we're talking about certain parasites in the body, if you talk about your pets and you talk about heartworm, that's certainly the case there, where the entire dog's heart will fill with these worms, these parasitic worms, and those worms will just continue stealing all the energy from the dog and start ripping apart its heart tissue such that the dog can no longer function, and he dies from heartworms. That's unfortunate. Obviously, it's not quite the extent that we're going to here in this case, because we're talking about a mother that's carrying a child. So no, it's not something that is necessarily fatal or is going to be fatal to the mother. But mothers are not necessarily without risk. We'll get to that later. But for now, let's just analyze this element of whether or not a fetus is actually a parasite to the mother. Okay. Now, parasites are technically defined, at least in my Biology 100 book, it is defined as an organism that depends on another organism to obtain nutrients and shelter required for growth or development while contributing nothing to the survival of the host organism. So that's actually fairly accurate when it comes to the relationship between a mother and her fetus, because the fetus is just requiring the mother to provide it with all the nutrients, all the oxygen that it needs to survive. And in doing that, the mother doesn't gain a whole lot of direct benefit. Alright. Provided she survives the process, she does get some other benefits. We'll talk more about those later. But for the moment, really, her specifically, she's really just being drained by this fetus. Alright. Now, the cool thing is that whether the mother actually carries the baby to term and undergoes childbirth, in that case, the mother actually incorporates some of the baby or fetus's cells into her own cells. So essentially the mother becomes this carrier for multiple lines of genes in her body. As such, the mother can actually become a chimera. Alright? And when we say chimera, we kind of mean an organism that has genetic material from multiple different hosts. And in this case, the mother may occasionally take genetic material from the fetus and incorporate it into her own tissue, such that she almost has two bodies living in her own body. That becomes incredibly important when it comes to fighting disease, because she almost gains a half of another immune system on top of her own for that first child. So having 1.5 immune systems can be advantageous for the mother. But that doesn't necessarily always play true, and it isn't necessarily always the case. Now, the other thing is that we have actually found the mother's cells penetrating the fetus and becoming incorporated with them. So we not only have a chance of the mother becoming a mix of organisms, but we also have a chance of the fetus becoming a mix of organisms. So both mother and fetus become chimera from this, just the childbirth process. So really, we as humans at least get to experience some level of increased survivability because of the crossing of cells across that placental barrier between the mother and the fetus. Now, additionally, we can kind of look at parasitism as being something that is a certain mode of existence for the time being. Alright, so when we look at parasites, we can see that some of them may not necessarily be a parasite all the time. So we start seeing certain other parasitic definitions that may actually play into this whole phenomenon. Because now we've just discussed, there may be potential benefit to the mother, but there may also be some potential benefit to the fetus. So does that necessarily mean that they're not parasites? Well, no. Okay, even though parasites are normally considered to be harmful for one and benefit to the other, and normally parasites are considered to be of different species, that's not always the case. We have specific terms used for parasites in different scenarios. So one scenario might be that an Adelpho parasite, okay, this is a parasite that parasitizes a species that's very closely related to itself. So the Adelpho parasite can parasitize not only its own species, but those that are cousins of its species. So whether we're talking about a turtle parasitizing its own species, or a turtle parasitizing species that are of a different family or genus to itself, those could be instances of parasitism as well. As such, we can have species that parasitize their own species. And that's where we get to, maybe we can actually technically classify a fetus as being a parasite, because it is within the same species. Alright. And that leads us to the next question. Well, do we see this anywhere else in the animal world? And we do actually. We see members of these anglerfish species, about 20 different species, that have the males actually parasitize the females. Okay, so the males will physically latch on to the female and essentially conform itself to the female, so it's basically a sperm producing appendage of the female. Alright, these males really don't care about much else in life. They kind of can't hunt very well themselves, so they will just kind of mold themselves onto the females and sap nutrients from her, but give her the advantage of being able to have a sperm producing thing attached to her so she can provide offspring for further generations. So that in itself is a great advantage to that particular species of anglerfish. Now, we can also have situations where parasites only parasitize during a certain stage of their reproduction or of their development. And in those cases, we call those guys temporary parasites. Now, obviously those anglerfish, they only parasitize at the adult stage. Once they actually become male or female, that's when they go out and seek out a female to latch onto and become one with. Okay, their circulatory systems become entwined and they become one. In other cases, this could be a very temporary lifestyle. And technically we can kind of consider that in the anglerfish because they only do that at the adult stage. Right? They don't do it at the juvenile stage, at the larval stage. They do it at the adult stage. So we can consider the anglerfish to be temporary parasites, even if it is the end point of their life cycle. Now, we also have what are called obligate parasites, which must parasitize in order to survive. Right? If they don't choose to parasitize, they will die, because they require on some organism their nutrients. They require those nutrients. They need to take nutrients from another organism. And so we call those obligate parasites. Now, we also have parasites that live inside of another organism's body, and we call those endoparasites. Okay, so endo tends to refer to the inside, exo tends to refer to the outside. In this case, referring to inside, it's just kind of related to the fetus that we mentioned before. So endoparasites must parasitize from within an organism. Now, additionally, what we have is kind of this situation where we're relating it back to women in having babies. All right. So a baby is inside the body, making an endoparasite. A baby only parasitizes during the first life cycle of its life. So not during puberty, not during adulthood, but during its development inside its mother. Okay. During its development to become a child in the first place. All right. Its fetal development is kind of what we're talking about. So because that fetus is requiring the mother for that early part of a development, we can assert that they are indeed endoparasites. And because they're only doing it during one life stage, we can assert that they are temporary parasites. And because of the fact that they are required to get their nutrients from their mother during that stage of life, we can call them obligate parasites. So by the end of the day, we can essentially call these organisms, which are also within the same species, we can call them these temporary obligate endo-adelpho parasites. That is what we can call fetuses. Now, once again, this is something that's highly controversial. A lot of people don't like calling their fetus a parasite, but there's the truth of it. Okay? We call them temporary because they only parasitize you at the first part of their life cycle. They are obligate because they have to require nutrients from you the entire time that they are inside of you. They are endoparasites because they must be inside of you to get those nutrients. And they are adelpho parasites because they can be within the same species. So, temporary obligate endo-adelpho parasites. That is what fetuses are. And that's okay. We can call those guys that. Alright? Now this gets into the question, sorry, as far as the pro-life or anti-abortion people would get into, as far as whether every single fetus needs to be preserved and needs to be protected up until they are birthed. This gets at a very, very controversial topic, okay? Because we're kind of trying to talk about pro-life as being pro the baby's life. Unfortunately, the baby is actually the one who is more likely to die in this whole scenario. So, fetuses are actually 30 times more likely to die than the females are. Having said that, there's also a significant chance that the female, the mother herself, may die during the process of carrying that baby to term. Alright? So, just the process of being a mother is not only very taxing on her, but it increases her mortality rate by a value greater than 0. Alright? So, this basically gets at the point that when you say pro-life, who are you talking about? Are you trying to say that a mother should take the risk to have a baby when she doesn't want to have the baby, and she's incurring that added risk to her life? She's incurring a lower quality of life because you want her to. Why should she care what you want? It's her body. She wants to live a good life for the next 9 months, let her. Honestly, what business do you have talking to her about her life and her quality of life? She can do whatever she wants. Alright? So it's difficult for me to sit here and be sympathetic with the pro-life people because they are trying to go around telling mothers what they should be doing about their own fetuses. When we've already established a fetus can be considered nothing but a parasite of the mother. And as such, she has a ruling on what happens to that parasite. Because the parasite is merely an extension of the mother herself. So what are we to do? What can we do? Well, we can be sympathetic to the mother's plight. The fact that in the US, we have 21 mothers out of 100,000 dying while trying to carry a baby to term. 21 out of 100,000. That's not a terribly high rate, but you know what? Here in Fort Wayne, we have over 200,000 people. That's 42 people. Instantly. 42 people that would die. Are those 42 people willing to die for the will of somebody else because somebody else wants them to carry a baby to term? That's kind of ridiculous. It's ridiculous to think about. Especially when we start thinking about and really breaking down the meaning of pro-life. Pro whose life? Are we talking about the fetus, which is 30 times more likely to die than the mother? Come on. They're very frail things. Why should we care about them as much as the mother, which has already been alive for at least 9 years? I think is the earliest mother there's ever been. You know, those years are kind of important. Fetus has been alive for months. So shouldn't we prioritize the thing that's been alive for a lot longer? The thing that's been alive for several years? Decades even? We should prioritize that as opposed to the thing that's only been around for a couple months, maybe. The collection of cells that's starting to differentiate into a fetus. Shouldn't that be our priority as the mother who's been around, who's learned things, who's alive, who's survived the process of childbirth when she herself was birthed? That's our priority. Excuse me. So all this kind of gets at the topic of what we mean by life when we say pro-life. We can also consider pro other people's lives. Like, does really bringing another child into this world help other people? That's a good question. Because from my perspective, I see other people being brought into this world as a plague on our existence. Because the human population is already overpopulated. We already have too many people on this planet. Why would we want more people here? I don't know. That doesn't make any sense to me. So when we're talking about pro-life, are we talking about pro the quality of life? Because the more people we have on this planet, the lower the quality of life is for the rest of us. So do you really want to have kids to experience a lower quality of life? Maybe not in your generation, but certainly in generations to follow. Because that's the inevitable. We only have finite resources on this planet. And so by bringing more people into existence on this planet, the rest of us will suffer a lower quality of life. Do you really want to do that? Or would you rather try to focus on making the world a better place for people? On trying to make the world a higher quality of life for the people that are here? You know, try to minimize the birth rate, to try to increase population control and knowledge about how to control that population as far as contraceptive methods, as opposed to this abstinence-only education, which really doesn't solve any problems, it just creates more problems. So those are some questions relating to pro-life of people. What about the rest of the environment? Right? Because we share our world with our environment. So wouldn't we want to also care for the environment around us? As far as, what about more people being on this planet, meaning more space for rainforests? Well, Those two things are at odds with one another. In order to have a greater emphasis on the environment, we have to have fewer people. If we have more people, we have to degrade more of our environment to spread to it, to collect resources, to sustain ourselves, to do all these things that humans do that basically serve to destroy the environment around them in order to support their own survival. So when we say pro-life, are we really considering those things? Are we considering the environment that we're living in? Are we considering that the more people there are, the less deer there are? Are we considering that the more people there are, the less fish there are? More often than not, we're not. Because we're so self-centered on ourselves that we can't possibly think about anything else in the world other than supporting ourselves. And you know what? That mentality will only get you so far. Because at some point you'll realize, there are only humans on this planet. What am I going to eat? And that's the advent of cannibalism. That's when the entirety of human civilization will fall. At that point. Because of the fact that we have focused so much on ourselves that we get to a point where it's only humans on this planet. We have nothing else. We have exhausted all of our other resources. And so then we're left with the advent, let's go to another planet. Okay. Well, let's send a team to Mars. Team of 20 people. And what are they going to do? They are going to live sustainably. Because if they don't, they die. And they know it. Because it takes over a year to get from Earth to Mars. So, if they need supplies, it's going to take it a year, at least, to get there. And they know that. Here on this planet, people seem to undergo the notion that, we really don't need anything. We have everything at our disposal right now. And that may be true, except for the fact that we kind of need resources on a regular basis. We need the environment to be functioning effectively in order to function as human beings at the level that we are. We need the decomposition to happen in the environment. We need those functions. We need water to be recycled at the rates that's being cycled in the environment. I mean, granted, we've been kind of encouraging via water recycling stations and such the cycling of water in the environment, but there are a number of natural mechanisms that are in place that are trying to help sustain our living on this planet. And that's problematic when all we seem to focus on is more people, more people, more people, more people. How can you keep focusing on more people with a finite level of resources? You can't. It's simply impossible. And so with these pro-life people, these anti-abortion people, they seem to only want more and more and more people. And yet if you physically encounter one of them and ask them, hey, what do you think about overpopulation? What do you think about waiting in long lines to get your food from Walmart? And I'm like, well, yeah, that kind of sucks. Traffic sucks. Waiting in lines suck. But yeah, more people. Okay, that makes sense. You're absolutely right. Let's encourage more people while you're griping about more people being around. Makes no sense at all. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to reach a point where we try to equilibrate, so to speak, with our environment. So we become a part of our environment as opposed to a plague on our environment. We need to recycle more. We need to be more environmentally conscious, more aware about our environment around us and our impact on it. As far as some of the things that have been lately taking hold, especially here in Fort Wayne, it's nice to see that a lot of people are trying to encourage getting out and riding bikes, walking to places, using public transportation. All those things will minimize your impact on the environment while leaving more resources for other people to use. so we can sustain ourselves at higher population levels because we're trying to minimize our individual impact on the environment. And that's really the nature of the whole green initiative, is to try to reach some sort of equilibrium or balance with the environment where we can have a lot of people functioning at a high level but minimizing their impacts on the environment. By recycling as much as possible, by being as efficient as possible as far as the nature of their fossil fuel use or their electricity use. All those things can kind of play into this to where you can have a very minimal impact on the world around you. And that will allow for more people to have a higher quality of life. But encouraging more people around you, that is kind of working against that particular goal. So what we should be trying to do is trying to minimize birth rate, trying to maximize our efficiency, trying to maximize our rate of recycling, of reusing, of caring for the environment around us, of wanting to go out there and go out to a park, a state park, and be like, hey, this is absolutely beautiful, and just appreciate nature and appreciate the organisms that we come across for what they are. And that is an important part of our environment, something that we should share the world with, as opposed to being like those guys at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge that I discussed last week, who just saw the refuge as an area that they should go in and rape and pillage. Be like, oh, well, this is great. We have a bunch of timber here. People can come in and log. We have a bunch of land here that we can just have our cattle come in and graze. They literally had no particular feeling for the environment and the environment's needs, and trying to focus on the species that were in those areas as far as our need to preserve them and encourage their life and their well-being as well as ours. Because as much as we like to see ourselves as above everything else on this planet, we're just another animal here. That's it. I mean, just another sucker, another species. It really doesn't matter. We have a bigger brain, better grasp of technology and tools than anything else, but really other than that, we're not terribly exceptional. So for us to sit here and think that we're so much better than everything else on this planet, it's complicating our ability to work with the environment, to live with the environment, to be in a place where we can try to achieve some sort of equilibrium that is not only positive for us, but positive for all the other life forms that we spend this life with. So just one of the things I'd like to kind of finish off with in the last half here is just trying to get at the definition of life in general. Because when people think pro-life, obviously they think of humans first, and then maybe they start to think about some of the things in the environment. Well, when we talk about life, life itself is characterized by a few different things. All right, so some of the characteristics of life include whether an organism grows, whether it moves, whether it reproduces, whether it responds to external environmental stimuli, and whether or not it has a metabolism. Now, the characteristics of life kind of vary textbook to textbook, but in my particular textbook for Bio 101, we actually see that all of the organisms on Earth share a certain set of characteristics. And those include having a common set of biological molecules, maintaining homeostasis, which is essentially where you are alive because you're maintaining some sort of desired level of balance with the environment. Whether that's talking about a desired amount of nutrients inside of your cells, like oxygen, and a desired amount of CO2 in the environment for plants. Those are two things there. Now, we also have the capability of organisms to evolve, right? So Every living thing has to evolve. Otherwise, it can't remain a living thing as far as being optimized for its environment. And that's the whole point of evolution, is trying to become better. Trying to discover a better way to fit in your environment that will promote your survival and the survival of several generations ahead of you. That's the point of evolution. And so you have to be able to do that as an organism. Now you also have to have some source of water in your life. Because liquid water, at least on the planet Earth, is essential for every single living organism. On other planets, they may require other essential nutrients as far as being able to support life. But here on Earth, our essential nutrient is water. Every organism needs water. Every organism produces water through metabolism in various contexts. That's just the nature of this planet and of all life on this planet. Now the other thing about life on this planet is that everything is composed of cells. Alright, so some fundamental unit that binds with other units and forms tissues. Okay, they work together, you have different cell types and you start forming tissues. You have different tissue types working together and you start forming organs. You have organs working together and you start forming organ systems, which typically comprise an organism. So you essentially have muscular cells, right, a single cell of muscular tissue, and it works together with another cell to form that muscular tissue. Multiple muscles come together to form an organ that's highly muscular, but also involves tissues and cells from other types. So if we're talking about the stomach, we're talking about, oh yeah, a lot of muscles, but we're also talking about some endothelial cells. Some cells that are going to absorb nutrients across their membranes. And then we start working with various organs together. So we start getting the interplay between the esophagus and stomach and the intestine and other parts of our body that are related to digestion. And all those different organs work together to help break down nutrients for our body. Then we can start seeing how multiple organ systems comprise the body that we are. So we have respiratory systems, we have digestive systems, we have excretory systems. We have all these different systems playing together to form a single individual human. And that's awesome. The fact that we can have that level of complexity as far as life is concerned on this planet. Now, of course, we are not the biggest life forms on this planet, even remotely close. You have things such as dinosaurs, of course, but also the blue whale, which is the largest organism on this planet that we know of. And that organism is also composed of a number of different cells coming together to form tissues, coming together to form organs, to form organ systems, to form the organism that is the giant blue whale. As such, it is difficult for us to say that us as human beings solely deserve the right to be called life. Because life is technically defined as anything that is a cell, anything that can evolve, anything that can do all these different things that living things do, responding to their environment. And so when we say pro-life, are we really taking into consideration all forms of life on this planet? Everything that is a cell, everything that responds to something. And often the answer is no, we're not. Because just by our very nature, humans are very selfish. And sometimes we get to a point where we lack perspective. I would like to discourage that. Because at the end of the day, we still share this planet with a number of other organisms. And as such, we need to respect and need to work with the other organisms on this planet in order to further our own existence so that we can be here hundreds of years into the future. Because otherwise, who knows? Maybe we can undergo so much global warming that we end up having an impasse where we can't possibly live on this planet without completely ravaging the environment around us. And our continued fossil fuel use and activities therein will start degrading the environment around us such that we can't possibly live here. And hence is the case in Interstellar. That's why I really appreciated the movie Interstellar, just because of how much they really kind of took a realistic direction in a number of things, in particular the future of humans on this planet. And essentially in that movie, you have a bunch of humans realizing, oh, what we're doing to this planet is not sustainable, and we are ravaging its resources and ravaging the environment in a way that is not going to ever bounce back. It's irreparable, the damage that humans are doing on this planet. And so our only solution is to move elsewhere, move to another planet, move to space, living in space in a sustainable way. And it's amazing because it very well may take that for humans to understand and to get this lesson on achieving a balance with their environment. Because notoriously, humans have been very imbalanced with their environment. Unless they were at low population levels. And that's what was actually kind of nice about the lack of technology in the first steps of human evolution. Is that when we were first evolving 50, 200,000 years ago, when we were first evolving, we were in such low numbers in the environment and we had such little technology that average age was 30, maybe 35. Right? We died pretty young because of disease, because of injury, because of the dangerous environment that we were living in. All those things factored into controlling our population. But now that we're getting to a point where average age is 80 years, we are trying to play catch up with that 50-year difference that imbalances the environment around us. With each human only living 30 years, we don't make a terrible impact on the environment. With each human living average of 80 years, that starts to really impact the environment around us. For each of those 80 years, you have to support a living human being that is spending most of their energy on being a mammal. All right, 75% roughly of our energy goes towards just producing heat. And it's that heat expenditure that starts taxing on the environment around us. Right, and that's under optimal conditions. It's really, realistically, it's probably about 90% of our energy is just wasted on producing heat. So not only does the presence of humans encourage heat in the environment around us, because we release heat to the environment around us all the time, but that coupled with our fossil fuel use helps trap that heat. So we have kind of a double-edged sword that the more people we have, more heat's being produced just by the people. Okay, much less the fact that every person tries to have a car for their own personal use, which produces heat, which releases these greenhouse gases. And it's these activities that eventually release enough heat to start warming the planet, to start changing the climate in various places of the planet. And it's these things that we really need to be concerned about on this planet at this time. Because if we don't take concern now, it's going to become such a big factor here in the future that we are not going to be able to recover from it in time to avoid any inevitable destruction of the environment of this planet. And so it's this consideration of having a natural sense for the environment and organisms around us that's going to result in our long-term equilibrium with the environment. Now, as such, it would be nice to see certain endangered species not disappear. So it would be nice to see some conservation programs there. It would also be nice to see certain things that have gone extinct, right? For instance, the dinosaurs, of course. it would be nice to see those brought back, actually, by genetic technology, by genetic engineering, to bring those animals back. Even though they kind of lost in the roll of the dice of evolution and of random events on this planet, it would be nice to see those guys come back. If nothing else but for the fact that we could learn from them. And that's the importance of maintaining other life forms on this planet, is that we have so much to learn from all other life on this planet. A burgeoning field in pharmaceuticals right now is the fact that we can take an organism, break it down into its fundamental components, see what things it secretes and uses in its environment, in the context that uses it in its environment, and take that and try to derive some usefulness towards humans. Now, with that, what we can do is we can have situations where the environment is actually supplying us with so much useful stuff that we start lengthening our lifespan. So, hey, we can look at the blue whale that's about to go extinct. We can look at that and find some sort of anti-cancer toxin in its blood. And we can start harvesting that and being able to produce it in a lab such that we extend our own lifespan by 10 years, at least. All right? And it's that kind of toxin discovery, that kind of pharmaceutical research that's going to drive everything else on this planet as far as benefits to humans. And being able to take those things from the living organisms that we can find right now, we are going to be able to work with those organisms in a laboratory setting, such that regardless of what happens to that organism in the wild, we can maintain its existence on this planet, at least in a lab. So when it comes to certain poison dart frogs in South America that have become extinct in the wild, we can maintain those guys in captivity. When it comes to the black rhinos in the world that there are none of in the wild, we still have some in captivity. And that's awesome, that we can keep those populations, we can keep them at those levels, that we can keep those populations of organisms persisting over the generations, because they may hold some clues as to how we can further support our living, support our lifespan on this planet. And so they may become very, very important. So when people sit here, like in my previously discussed topic, the Bundy Militia and the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, where they just wanted to go into the refuge and just rape and pillage everything, that's problematic, because we need to learn to treasure all life, and that we can take things, we can learn lessons from other life forms and apply them to furthering our own interests, to extending our lifespan, to improving the quality of life in humans. It's only with those compensations that we can afford to increase the population at all of humans. Because if we continue just willy-nilly increasing the population of humans without increasing our quality of life along the way, we're going to have a state to where, oh yeah, we have 10 billion people on the planet, but we all live like we're in Nigeria. All right, or in some poor third world country where there's limited access to medicine, limited access to electricity, the internet, information, anything like that. Well, we don't want that for our children. Okay, I'm never going to have kids personally. Just going on a side, I will definitely be remediating that ability of mine here shortly. But I never insist on having kids. But others in my family, particularly my sister, she's actually working on her fourth kid. That's something I don't necessarily encourage, because really I only see every couple in the world being able to support one kid at a time. But like I said, that's something that kind of requires more effort as far as working on improving the quality of life for the kids that we currently have. Much less to work on improving the quality of life for generations ahead of us. Because the one truth of life is for it to end. Right? And when we reach the end of our life, do we want to sit here and say that we have left the world a better place? Because it's very difficult, at least from my perspective, to see that I've left the world a better place by having 10 children. Because in actuality, I've left the world a worse place. Okay? And that just comes down to the fundamental nature of human resource usage. The fact that every human on this planet uses resources. That uses resources that other humans could be using. And of course that gets at a topic that I'd like to discuss next time, as far as the issue with organic foods and farming techniques versus traditional or GMO farming techniques and foods. Just because of the fact that there's such a huge discrepancy between those two. And how are we going to feed the people of the future? Well, how have we fed them in the past 100 years? With traditional GMO techniques. So it's going to be those techniques that take us into the future. Alright, as much as people may want to try to glorify certain other techniques, we are going to need to continue using the methods of the past 100 years or 200 years to carry us into the future. Because if we start looking back into methods of homeopathy, of some of the shamanism and other techniques that were not necessarily ever proven to be effective, but were insisted on being effective by various members of the community in the past, we are going to throw ourselves back into the Dark Ages. And the Dark Ages is not where we belong. We belong in the modern age. And in the modern age, we use technology, we use science, and we use facts to support our points. And we use those things to try to further the quality of life for humans, try to advance us to the next level. In so doing, we're definitely going to be going into the direction of more machine reliance. Okay? Whether we rely more on machines to do mundane tasks, like some of the automated robots, even some of the simple things that we have at home right now, as our cell phone. You know, if we have automated services on our cell phone that can answer our questions, we can sit there and say, hey, I would like you to look up the cost of dinner at this restaurant. Well, that is going to result in an increased reliance on machines to start doing certain tasks of our work. And so in the future, we're going to start seeing more changes when it comes to how humans play out their lives, how humans consider themselves in the environment. Because if we can start making skyscrapers that are half plants, that's a great thing. That's going to further our life and well-being. If we start planting farms everywhere that we can, just even a little simple 10 by 10 plot of corn. If we start doing that on a massive scale, that's going to really help increase our sustainability on this planet. But once again, that's going to be to a finite point. You cannot support an infinite number of people on this planet. As such, you cannot support an infinite number of people on this planet, or even a finite number of people on this planet, with a certain quality of living. It is going to be that quality of living that defines how many people you can have on this planet. And as such, we have to monitor exactly what we do and how we do it, so that we take into account the consideration of other people, of future generations. Because it's only once we reach that point that people can start to harmonize or equilibrate with their environment around them. Now, this of course leads into the next topic of, as far as what humans are going to do when they reach that point. When we reach equilibrium with this planet, what are we going to do? Well, of course, naturally, we're going to spread to other planets. Going to encourage other avenues for colonization. Because once our birth rate balances our death rate here on this planet, we have to start looking elsewhere to spread. So we can help encourage population growth on other planets in the solar system and elsewhere. And that's going to require a lot more technology than we have now. Because right now it takes over a year to reach Mars. And that can be problematic, in particular for people. So we have to achieve certain levels of technology we do not have yet in order to be able to colonize other planets, become interstellar from the broad perspective of humanity. And along the way, we have to take some of the organisms that we actually need to survive. We need to take some of the plants that we have, some of the animals that we have. We need to take those along for the ride so that we can farm them, domesticate them, use them to derive resources from, to support our own population growth. Now, of course, this kind of plays into 3D printing and maybe the creation of meat-like organic substances that are not necessarily derived from meat. So however we can do that and however we can balance that in the future, that is definitely a great direction to go in. Because we need to learn how we can possibly sustain our quality of life here on other planets or in any other place in the world. And so it's going to take a lot of effort on our parts to discover that technology, to lay that framework for exploration to other places in the galaxy. So I'd just like to thank you for joining me today on Based on Facts. Again, my name is Chris Rex, and I will see you next week.